All right, so in this video, I just want to talk through some of the most basic key foundational points for standing practice as it relates to internal arts training and explain how and why standing is typically where a lot of systems start because it is the foundation. And if that foundation is not built, everything else in the system, everything else beyond that in the actual art is pretty much impossible. And it's like, unless we've built up the right engine and converted our body into the right machine or the right type of system for that particular endeavor, then basically we can never even find the door, which means we can never even walk through it to then begin and start even attempting that endeavor. So I think it's a really big misconception. People think if I hold some posture, then I'm doing some art. No, you're just putting your body in some particular posture. And it doesn't matter if it's things such as Tai Chi or simple zhan, zhuang sort of practice, standing stake, or Yichuan, or Xingyi, or even some Qigong and Neigong sort of stuff. Unless the body's been transformed, that's all basically impossible and not even worth talking about, because basically we have to build the foundation first, and usually the easiest and most relevant way to do that is, of course, standing, which is why it's emphasized so much. So definitely from the jump, we want to understand that this is not meditation, even though you very often see online people talk about put your arms like this and you're doing meditation. What ends up happening is people just sort of falling asleep standing up, which I guess is kind of relaxing, but ultimately the posture really doesn't matter at a certain point, other than the fact that if you haven't built up the prior conditions, putting your arms in this particular way will basically just ensure that your neck and shoulders and such get locked up, rather than actually going through the process which allows that to manifest naturally from the inside out, which is what I'm going to explain through the process of just the basics of standing. So there's of course different ways of doing it depending on the goal, and different shapes and structures and positions and postures. But typically most systems will start something where you're at least somewhat sat and relaxed in the qua to some degree, which is kind of the inguinal bikini line, iliopsoas-ish sort of region. And then your arms would usually be somewhere at your side, and they typically would not be up. And for quite a long time, that posture and that endeavor is just going to be pretty physical and pretty mechanical, and is going to be a lot to do with your body's relationship to gravity, and then how cleanly gravity is able to move through your system. Because the idea here is that pretty much all of us, if we're human beings that have lived a life, our system is not open. Our channels, if you want to even say that, even just on a very physical level, and I'll define what that means, are not open. So in this level, in this instance, in this foundational stage, what that means is gravity is not able to cleanly pass through your body, first down to the lower abdominal region, which would be called sinking, and then eventually all the way down through your legs down to the feet, which then will be called descending. But that's another sort of really important distinction that a lot of people get lumped in together, and just kind of worthy of its own video and its own explanation for understanding the differences between those two things. But eventually what ends up happening is that the end goal there, or the thing we would want to happen, is that eventually things open up, the body unravels, these things happen, and then gravity and such is able to cleanly move through the body. And then there's a type of buoyancy and openness that starts to happen inside the body. And then eventually the sinking turns into descending, and then that descending starts to turn into a return sort of expansion, opening force that goes up through the body. And again, many different systems will go about this perhaps in different ways, depending on the shape or the structure or a lot of different variables. But this is just, again, the basic things that if you can't have, then none of the stuff even really matters. talking about, specific postures and their effects, or specific forms and their effects, or breathing methods, or mental qualities and focuses. None of that is even relevant or particularly that useful unless this basic thing has happened. So what experientially ends up happening is that just through standing and the sheer fact of closing your eyes, having a fairly basic posture, having a fairly basic rudimentary set of principles or alignments and such that you're trying to keep, you're then able to start going through the process of systematically relaxing and releasing various things in your body, which I guess as I say that, that's not even the best way to describe it. First, what happens is you become aware of it. Because for most people, their body is bound, there's adhesions, there's injuries, there's just the simple fact of being a human life, and the simple fact that internal arts are not natural. The internal arts process is not natural, it's not inherent, it's not something that someone can particularly just click with that easily. It's not something you just show up to a class you do for 10 minutes and you're like, oh, I did it, I got it, I'm good. No, this is like 5, 10, 20 years or more of a process, depending on how far someone wants to go and the depth of transformation that they want to have. So again, just on the basic levels, first, this block of numbness, which is usually what people's relationship to their body is. Maybe they feel their hands and maybe their forearms, and maybe they feel kind of sort of their feet and their heads roughly somewhere, but everything else basically just invisible. So what happens is through that process, through many hours of correct practice, or at least as correct as you can get, things start to become very clear and tangent and tangible and very obvious to you. So you feel the force of gravity and you feel it moving through you, and you feel, oh, it's stuck. So you'll feel in many instances like your body is doing all these really weird things, but actually you're just stood still. So sometimes that can be very disorienting. So sometimes what that is just way tissues are torqued, or a particular nerve. It feels like the nerve is like this crazy torque, but obviously it isn't. It might be something very small, or you feel like part of your spine is crushed, or a joint is crushed, but we're talking very tiny fractions of movement. It's not like your shoulder is going to go this big or something like that, but it can feel like it, which is sometimes why trusting feelings and perceptions isn't always the best thing. But point is, you start developing the awareness. So then through being able to just allow gravity and things to move through you and allow yourself to let go, while also maintaining certain structural pinpoints and certain structural release points. So you're having a relationship between stability and something moving through, rather than just being crushed and falling down. Things really start to unbind and unwind, and then that can cause a lot of other strange sensations: heat, warmth, tingling, things rushing, things moving, ants crawling on the skin, things like your body like shaking. If you're familiar with like TRE or trauma release exercises, and people do this like shaking, that can start to happen. And again, that's not chi, that's not anything spiritual, it's not meditation, it's not spirits, it's not transcendence, it's not anything, it's just your body releasing or unwinding something, which is of course great, useful, and can be extremely great for your health and for your overall mental, emotional well-being. But it's, again, just very physical and very basic, and just could be as simple as awareness in relationship to gravity, and not even really needing anything esoteric or chi-based or anything whatsoever. And I think even just for a lot of people, for basic health sort of things, that can be really useful. But again, it's not the posture, it's not the form, it's not all the things people fixate on. It's actually, firstly, just the relationship to gravity and being able to maintain those pinpoints. So basically that would be keeping your skeleton pinned in space, and then allowing the tissues to sort of sink and fall and unwind and unbind off of it, which is, again, it's something you have to get the knack for, because it's not relaxation, it's not going floppy, it's not going soft, it's not switching off. it's not all the things that we're used to doing. It's something else which is different and unique, which is developed through going through this process, which is why it's referred to as different words, which is why there is the process, which is why there is the tradition and the practice and the lineages and all these different things. Because if it was just relax or just let go or just be soft or just whatever other things people do, then you wouldn't really need all this other complicated stuff. You would just do that. Like, it really doesn't matter. So then really after many years of this practice and these things happening, different levels of body awareness start to be accessible. And again, this is still just body. And again, there's different focuses that different systems would go on, but fundamentally they all will start at this similar place. So at least on a very, again, basic, simple physical level, it comes down to the ability of gravity to cleanly move through your body and not get stuck or hung up, which again starts by going to the lower abdomen, then going to the feet, and then starts to actually go back the other way. And then even that unwinding, and then especially the going back the other way, like I said, can be very healing. People's joints, they get compressed. It can take the pressure off the joints. Their skeleton can actually have a buoyancy to it, meaning people sit a lot. So a lot of people's hips and their spine, especially their pelvis, get jammed up. Well, actually getting this process going allows the joints and the tissues to start to spring back. And then, for example, personally, I attest to this, my flexibility, my mobility and such has gone way up, even though I don't stretch really and I don't work on it, just from standing, because of firstly getting the clean flow of gravity so things can unbind enough. So that could be a certain degree of channel opening, meaning you have your bone and you have the skin on top and there's all this stuff in between. And for a lot of us, it can be like kind of bound up, kind of stuck together, not separate, can't slide, can't move separately. You could call that adhesion. You could call it a lot of different things. You could talk about fascia. You could talk about the zhuang. You could talk about the membranes. You could talk about all these different things, but really at a certain level, especially at this level for foundational stuff, it really doesn't matter. It's just basically the stuff between the skin and the bone that can move, slide independently. But when it's stuck together, then you get nerve impingement, you have impaired blood circulation, you have, chronic muscle tension, chronic tension patterns in general, and just the body doesn't feel very good because in a simple sense, things aren't really moving very well. So then basically, let's say you've gone through that basic process, and then your system perhaps focuses a little bit more on energetics. Maybe it's going towards Neigong or Qigong. So in that case, then the lower dantian as an energy center would be more relevant, which again is distinct and different from the dantian as in Tai Chi, which was like more of a different region, a different application, a different usage, a whole different thing from just actually an energetic center that eventually becomes kind of like sort of a battery pack, sort of a cell in the body for actual chi or whatever you want to call it, which again is its own process. That's not inherent in a posture. It's not inherent in just a form. Again, it's its own sort of software that needs to be installed and its own programming that needs to be run and gotten to a level of efficiency. But the systems that I've done and studied within are more towards that way. And then on top of all the physical stuff that I just talked about, then there's perhaps reverse breathing or certain breathing methodologies. And then there's putting your posture in a particular way so that your body's natural center of gravity is lowered and anchored to where roughly the lower dantian energy center is. The weight would be put over certain parts of the foot. The body would be put in a specific posture, forced to create to try to like kickstart that process a little more efficiently. Take that, and then maybe you could get some assistance from a teacher who could kind of put a little bit of extra fuel in the tank just to kind of facilitate that along. And then actually a lot of the stuff can start to process and move a lot more quickly, because it's almost like, in a very simplistic way, your nervous system has a current through it. You put more current through it, there's more activity, more things happen more quickly and faster, which can be great for some people and can be quite risky and contraindicated and really not helpful for a lot of other people, especially people dealing with any degree of mental illness or any degree of drug addiction or strong emotional turmoil and things of this nature. That side of it would probably want to be avoided and just stick to physical stuff. And in actuality, in all honesty, if someone is dealing with those things, skip internal anything whatsoever. Go do friggin' ecstatic dance, go to the gym, go for a run, go swimming, do basic normal stuff to make your body stronger and healthier and more fit, and it's going to be a much better thing. And you can obviously recircle back to internal stuff if you want at a later date, once things are in a better position. But like I said, in terms of the standing process, if it's going more energetic, then having particular breathing methods, getting the center of gravity in the right place, a little bit of assistance from the teacher, then boom, you have more sort of current moving through the nervous system, which can help open and unbind things even more. And then that is its own process, which again could be 3 to 5 years or more, depending on the person and how intensely they're hitting it and just who and how they are as a person. But then basically once that's sort of done, and then the body, let's just say, opens and fills to a degree, which if it's not open, then it can't fill. So it's kind of like at a certain point irrelevant to talk about even that sort of things, but it's at least the door to where then once the body is open to a very functional degree, then the energetic stuff starts to happen. And let's say the dantian fills up to a certain degree, so that there's the tissues and the soft squishy bits underneath the skin can move independently of the bone, and the entire body connects up and starts to move differently than just hinge or regular stuff. Then you're sort of at the door of the actual art, whether that's whatever it is. And anything prior to that is just preparation or transformation or hopefully arriving at the place. Because then once you're sort of at the door, then very minor changes to mental qualities can have huge structurally reorganizational qualities and change the way things express and the way your body is shaped just from the slightest mental shift. And then posture actually becomes very relevant and important, because it's almost like a cymatics, or it's like a magnet with filings where the posture reshapes something. And then especially if the filling is quite good, it's almost like you have a bit of a magnetic bubble-ish thing sort of around you, which it's not what it is, but kind of sort of feels like that. And then depending on the posture and certain variables, then it all just rearranges. So it's like from head to toe, your entire body rearranges and restructures around whatever that shape or posture might be, depending on, again, whatever it is that you're doing. And then at that point, now you're sort of actually doing something a bit more internal, because like I said, you have the openness inside the body, so that slight mental adjustments actually have a big difference, or the posture. So then what ends up happening is every time you move, every slight adjustment is a different posture, and moving almost becomes like a stop frame animation. And then actually at that point, training really sucks. Doing any form or any movement is not good. It's not enjoyable. And it's like some days or sometimes when you really click in and connect and things are going together, you're lucky to do 1 rep. And then you look around and people are like just cracking through it. And like, oh, this is so easy. This is so relaxing. And it's like, well, yeah, because when your arms move, it's not rearranging your innards and the entire squishy matrix between your skin to your bone every time you move. Every little minor adjustment on any aspect of your body, depending on what you're organizing around, whether it's your feet or your quad or your shoulders or laogong or whatever, And then at that point, it becomes a very different sort of experience. But the problem is that there's a lot of information available about the stuff already past going through the door. So you have people showing up being like, I'm doing Tai Chi because I'm doing single whip, or I can't really do stuff because of the camera angle, but I'm doing zhan zhuang posture. I'm doing san ti posture. I'm doing xing yi. I'm this magical posture, and like, oh, I got to find the right posture. Well, what does this posture do versus that posture? Well, what is this one? What is that one? What about this form? This other. But the thing is, all of those questions kind of go away when you get to that certain point, because you have enough openness, you have enough filling, and you have enough chi, and you have enough stabilized developmental qualities that you just do it, and then you kind of just know automatically, because going through the process informs you and teaches you sort of from the inside what is going on and why and what it's doing, more so than any teacher can explain or some dork on a video can explain. And then it's pretty apparent then at that point to look at other people and say no, 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 yes, no, 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 or see from the questions or see from all the different things really what's going on. Like the whole thing, not the whole thing, but some aspects become like obvious and perceptible to you, in the same way that parts of your body that were, invisible become almost like a somatic MRI. Like you mentally just know the shape, the size, the location, like echo sort of location, that your awareness of all these subtle things in your body, different fluids, different, your blood or interstitial fluid or synovial fluid, or nerves versus ligaments versus tendons versus fascia versus muscles versus organs versus, all these different things become perceptible and differentiated inside of you, just like red isn't yellow and brown isn't black and sweet isn't salty and all these types of things. It becomes obvious and clear and like actual tangible thing for you, and then that develops quite on down the line as well. But again, it all goes back to these fundamental basic things, and that's really what you don't see taught, what you don't see explained, and what you don't see people actually focusing on. Because to be fair, it is kind of boring, and it does suck, and it is really painful, and it really is uncomfortable. When you really get into it and you really hit it, it is like feeling like you got into a car crash. It's feeling like the deepest deep tissue massage that you've ever had, all in one, but it's way more intense and more uncomfortable and stronger because your eyes are closed and your awareness is inside. Versus, like, for example, if you're running on a treadmill or something at a gym or doing something of that nature, your awareness is outside to a large degree, and you're listening to something, you're watching something, maybe you took pre-workout, or you have all this stuff going on, you have all this other stimulation. But for internal stuff, that you take all that away, and then it's just you and that discomfort. And that's, I think, it sucks, but it's sort of, I think, what weeds and filters a lot of people out. And then once even that starts to go inside to a degree, then also certain aspects of your personality, your awareness, how your self is structured, starts to become hopefully apparent and clear to you as well. It becomes tangible, something you can actually see and observe. And then that becomes more of a thing, especially once the chi and the filling and the opening and this stuff starts to happen, because then your awareness actually has something that is not so much mental nonsense, not so much emotional nonsense or stress or all these types of things. And that in and of itself becomes a whole study and a whole other side of development, because mostly what people have is just stress-based desires, subtle feeling and sensation, emotion, or mental chatter. But the thing is, when you silence that to a large degree and that sort of maybe just goes to the background and something else comes to the foreground, that is in essence something that is very interesting, at least to me, and something that makes a lot of things apparent and actually creates a lot of changes and a lot of movement and transformation. But again, none of that can even happen without the first initial stages. And then, like I said, it is unpleasant, it is uncomfortable, it does reveal things that you maybe don't want to reveal, unless maybe, you know, anyone watching or training is just an angel and complete Puritan who doesn't have any things about themselves, and they've somehow leapfrogged the human condition, then cool. But for most regular folk, the human condition starts to become something that is very clear and in your face, because you're encountering the monkey and the human organism from the inside out. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense and gives some overview in a very general, straightforward way. And I try to use minimal jargon and minimal nonsense or minimal complication to talk about something that for quite a while is just like quite physical and quite just, again, relaxing and opening in the relationship to gravity and releasing the soft squishy bits off of the skeleton and keeping that separation, and then keeping that development going on until certain things really start to change and shift and develop. So hopefully that helps, and you can let me know if there's any questions. I'd be happy to expand further. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.